for another edition of Black Tower Radio. We are broadcasting on worldnewsradio.today. That's worldnewsradio.today. Also on 1040 AM, 92.1 FM, WYSL in Rochester, New York. I am your host, Jake Fox. And we are joined by a much requested guest. We've had so many requests for our guest here, Karen Hudes, the World Bank whistleblower. She was the chief counsel at the World Bank for 22 years, and now she's out there fighting the good fight. Welcome to the show, Karen.
Thanks for having me on, Jake. Glad to be with you.
So, Karen, why don't you dive into your role at the World Bank? What did you do there? Give us a little bit of your background.
Okay, I was there for 21 years, and it actually took me 5 years to get there because I always wanted to work in the World Bank. That's because I studied development economics at the University of Amsterdam and law, and if you're a lawyer interested in development economics, that's the place to go. And a lot of people have been criticizing me for coming from a place like the World Bank, which has been involved in a lot of questionable activities. And, I always knew that it was going to be challenging to work at the World Bank because before I went there, one of the people that I got to know in Washington, it's a city of brown bags, which is to say you go to lunches and there are power brokers and you get to talk to them and you get to know them. And so I got to know a lawyer named Aaron Brochus, who had been the longest-serving general counsel at the World Bank. And he was an old man by the time I got to know him. He was in his 80s. And I played the cello and he played the piano. So we used to play Beethoven sonatas. And then he would tell me what it was like at the World Bank. He told me what it was like when Robert McNamara was the president of the World Bank. He started in the 60s, McNamara, and stayed there for 10 years. And Brochus, as the general counsel, was trying to keep the rule of law inside the World Bank and didn't manage to do that. The place just deteriorated. And, of course, I was fascinated because the whole reason I went to Holland was I was actually one of the people that went to Woodstock. And when they were saying love it or leave it, I was pretty disgusted about what was going on. And so I went to Holland. And what I learned, I studied development economics, as I said, and one of the things that I learned was that if you were interested in development, that you really did have to go back and start working through some of the problems that were going on in the United States. And it's only now that I've managed, with the help of a lot of people, to figure out why strange things kept happening. But I've been having on-the-job learning. When I was in the World Bank, for the first 10 years or so, I was just going to the various countries that I was assigned to. But I was also brought into the World Bank by the general counsel who had been the general counsel of OPEC before he became the World Bank general counsel. His name was Ibrahim Shihada. And Ibrahim Shihada, after I was there for a year, had another Egyptian lawyer introduce me to the man who was representing the Egyptian government. And so I had some pretty high-level contacts, which, if you're somebody who's working in Washington, that's what you have to do. You have to build up a network. And so I did, and I got to know more board members. And as things started and because I had been given actually the operation manual of the World Bank by Aaron Brochus, who told me that actually the most important job in the World Bank is not the presidency. It's really the legal department because they're sitting in the middle, the heart of the beast, as a linchpin between the board, which there's 25 board members. 8 of them are representing the 8 largest economies. The thing about the World Bank and the IMF is that it's not one country, one vote. The votes are weighted by the size of the economies. They're not adjusted properly, but they are adjusted to some extent. And then the other 17 executive directors are sitting in groups of countries. So I got to know countries, and some of the board members had been there for a long, long time, and they got to know me. And of course, I was working on their countries. I rotated. I started out working on the Middle East for 10 years, and what would happen roughly is that I would go there, and the World Bank, people get really mad at the World Bank for doing terrible things, but if a country gives a little bit of pushback and makes the World Bank serve as its tool rather than, it really depends on the integrity of the elites in the country that are dealing with the World Bank. And as we now know, fast forward, the whole world has been dominated by a group of bankers that were studied by some economists and mathematicians at the Federal Institute of Technology. And what they found out was that there is one company that's dominating the whole earth called the Network of Global Corporate Control. And, of course, inside the World Bank, I didn't know at the time about that group. This study came out from the Federal Institute of Technology in 2011. But I certainly did know that the World Bank was not following the rules. And at the time, I was kind of... I was idealistic, I was naive, and I've had some pretty serious on-the-job training. And I got to work with a group of World Bank whistleblowers when I was inside the World Bank. And, they gave me some pretty strenuous talking to. They said, Karen, you're just all over the place. You have to figure out that this is not the way you want it to be. It's quite different. And, of course, as a lawyer, I knew it was my job to make the World Bank follow the rules. And one of the most important tools that I had came to the World Bank in 2004 from the Department of Defense. It's something called a power transition model. Jacek Kugler, a political scientist at Claremont University, and I'm just now looking at a book that some of his, he's been working together with a group of people. What he's done is he's taken all of the concepts of political science and he's matched that with what you call game theory. And the models that are that this group has come up with predict how coalitions will form, and they're 90 to 95% accurate. And so I've now been working with a coalition of all of the countries that are members of the World Bank that are taking down this company that thinks it rules the world. And this company, it turns out, has been ruling the world since before the previous ice age. So that's pretty much a long wind-up as to where I got where I am. But, I've had some very serious on-the-job training, and people have been watching me as I get groomed for what has to happen. It's not so much that I'm somebody who wanted to seize control. I just wanted the world to follow the rules. And I knew that if we didn't, one of the things that Jacek Kugler said to me in 2004 was that we had 5 years to prevent a nuclear war in the Middle East. And we actually did. That was Syria. And the model has now, which is 90 to 95% accurate, it's now been predicting that, as I said, there's a coalition for the rule of law that's taking out this network of global corporate control. It's just taking them out. They can't match everybody working together. And I'm, a lot of people want to know who I'm working with. I'm working with everybody. You can see, as you look at my Twitter account, which people I'm working with, who's been telling me what. And sometimes people tell me things that, I've been pretty gullible and fallen for some of these things and managed to discredit myself. And then I dust myself off and I say, well, I guess I won't make that mistake again. And I just, I'm just, one of the things I like to show is a picture of a person at a switchboard, an operator. And that's one of the functions that I have. I'm getting information from the very top center of the international financial architecture to the troops, up and down. And so what I tweeted today was something that was coming to me from just any old person. I've been telling everybody in the United States that they have to get in touch with their county governments. And the reason why I'm not telling them to go to their state governments, I started out by telling them to do that, and then it turned out that the states were just too corrupt. The governors were too corrupt. The attorneys general were too corrupt. The reason this happened is there's a group called Metro 1313, which was financed by the Rockefellers, started out in Chicago, and what it is it's an organization which sounds innocuous. It looks like it's constructive. It's trying to get buy-in and cooperation among the states, but what it really turns out is that group has been trying to dismantle the states and turn them into 10 FERC regions. Some of the states have even erased their boundaries. So, and those organizations are very strong. I've gone to some of their conferences and tried to let the states know that they really were states and had to act like states. One of those conferences was something called the National Association of State Legislators. I went into that. I had to pay $800 for admission, and they had a speech at the end where there was a guy who was supposedly an expert on the U.S. Congress, and I asked him a point-blank question. My question was, has the United States been under military rule since 1861, and the U.S. Congress voting to extend a state of emergency behind closed doors every year? And I already knew the answer to that question. And this was a guy who was supposedly one of the best experts on the Senate. And he said he didn't know the answer to the question. So, I mean, that's why what I'm telling people to do. And so the tweet that I did today was one of the people took me up on it and sent me the email that she had sent to her county government. And there are different organizations for the county governments, but the one that I've been dealing with is called the County Executives of America. There's about 800 counties where they vote to have a county executive. And so I've been using that organization, and I live in Montgomery County, Maryland, and the man who's the president pro tem of that organization, Ike Leggett, used to be their president, and then he became the president pro tem. Anyway, I've been dealing with him, and it turns out that Montgomery County, Maryland, their police chief is the president of an organization called the Major Cities Chiefs Association. Anyway, so what I do is I hold these people accountable, and I went to a meeting of the Major Cities Chiefs Association, and I went up to Montgomery County chief, and I asked him whether he was going to maintain the peace as the citizens took back their country. You know, in other words, I was asking him point blank, whose side was he on? Was he on the network of global corporate control side, or was he on the side of the what I'm calling the Coalition for the Rule of Law, which is that coalition consists of the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and something called the Group of 77. That's 133 developing countries. And I studied that coalition in 1976 when I was a second-year law student. I went to the United Nations, and I could see that there was a group called UNCTAD that was pretty much taking over. And so I wrote about a 200-page paper, and I've put that out. I just put the link to that paper up on Twitter, so anybody that wants to read it, just go look at my Twitter account. Anyway, so what I've been doing is I've just been documenting the coalitions that form, and I've been telling people about it, and I've been telling people to hold these coalitions to account, and anybody who is trying to weasel out of this gets a spotlight shined on them. So I'm just using now the social media I tried in the very beginning to use the mainstream media. I didn't understand that the mainstream media was dominated by this network of global corporate control and censored. And actually, that's really been going on the Internet as well. I would say that a good two-thirds, if not more, of the alternative media is just mainstream media in drag. And you can see that by what happened with Reddit, where Adam Schwartz was suicided, and then Condé Nast took over. But anyway, so that's sort of a long wind-up, but that's my background. That's what I'm doing here.
Well, why don't we get into what this global corporate control corporation, what sort of activities are they involved in?
They're involved in everything. What they do, I'll tell you the worst that they're doing. They're trying to have the United States surrender unilaterally. They've taken the U.S. military and they've put something called Knights of Malta at the top. Knights of Malta, these are people who, they get indoctrinated into this group. And John F. Kennedy was talking about that group. He was saying that a free country and secret societies are not compatible. Well, the Knights of Malta is a secret society. And so John Dempsey and, not John Dempsey, Martin Dempsey. And there's another guy in the Department of Defense. Well, it started out where I was asking Hagel to start court-martialing these Knights of Malta because they're trying to take down the United States unilaterally. And the way they're doing that is they're using an old trick that the Romans used back in the 400s, just before the Dark Ages, and that is to take the currency and to make it worthless. And then when the currency crashes, everybody falls apart because they can't buy goods and they all starve to death. That's what the Dark Ages were. And so the Roman denarius, you can see graphs of how they were taking the precious metals out of the coins, and then at a certain point there was this terrible crash, and they had the Dark Ages. Well, that's what quantitative easing is. They're taking the network of global corporate control is trying to make the United States crash by having the dollar become worthless. And what's happened with the BRICS is they are no longer using dollars in their international trade, and also the G77 has also said they're not going to be using dollars in international trade. So the reserve currency status of the dollar is now gone. And that means that there's way, way too much Federal Reserve notes. And the thing about Federal Reserve notes is that's not real currency. That's counterfeit currency. It used to be that the Federal Reserve note could be converted into gold, and that ended in 1971. And now we just have paper where people don't have that much confidence, and you can tell that there's a loss of confidence in the paper currencies because of something called backwardation. Precious metals traders know about this. When the price of gold for immediate delivery is higher than the price of gold for future delivery, that's very unusual. It shows that people have lost confidence in paper money. And there's going to be a huge, huge crash that's going to make what happened in the 30s look like nothing if we don't transition out of the Federal Reserve note. And so what you see in the tweet today is you see me talking to the various people saying we have to start using the world's gold. And the World Bank and the IMF were created for that main purpose. I didn't know that at the time I went there. But as I said, as I've been flailing around, people have been giving me on-the-job training. And, of course, they've been trying to give me incomplete information and manipulate me. But luckily, I didn't fall for some of their lines. And so I knew, as the lawyer inside the World Bank, what the role of the Board of Governors was and what the role of the Board of Executive Directors was, and I also knew that the president of the World Bank and the managing director of the IMF were exceeding their authority because there was a strange convention inside the World Bank. It said that the board was never going to vote on anything. They were just going to rubber stamp what the president wanted to do. And when I saw a lot of corruption, and I've talked about that in other places, I don't want to waste everybody's time and bore the people that have heard the stories, but I was assigned to the Philippines. At the time I was assigned to the Philippines, I was unhappy about that. Ibrahim Shihada moved me from the Middle East to the Philippines. I said, no, I want to stay working on the Middle East. He said, no, you have to go to the Philippines. I didn't realize that the Philippines is the country where the world's gold is stored. But I found this out because there's a fellow named Wolfgang Struck who told me about it after I'd been booted out unceremoniously for telling the U.S. Congress about this power transition model. What I said to the U.S. Congress was that we in the United States were going to lose something called the Gentleman's Agreement. That was a convention that lasted for 66 years that said that the countries were not going to bother to help select the president of the World Bank. They were just going to leave this all up to the United States. And this power transition model, which is very, very accurate, was saying that that wasn't going to continue if the U.S. started acting corrupt. And I could see that the U.S. was acting corrupt. One of the things that they did was there's a guy, Paul Wolfowitz, who became the president of the World Bank, and he had a girlfriend, Shaha Riza, and he gave her a 30% pay raise. And so the board fired him, and I speak Dutch because I was studying in Holland, and I happened to be in Holland, and the man on the board whose job it was to fire Paul Wolfowitz was complaining to people in Holland in Dutch. He wrote in the newspaper that the board members were getting blackmailed for trying to fire Paul Wolfowitz. And then, of course, they went ahead and fired Paul Wolfowitz. But since I read Dutch, I went back, and I had been making the rounds in the U.S. Congress, and I started complaining to the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, which was chaired by Joe Biden, and it had two junior senators on there, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. And so I said, you really had better watch out because you're going to lose the Gentleman's Agreement. The board is angry. They're firing Paul Wolfowitz, and you can't blackmail the board. And what were they blackmailing them with? Do you remember when Eliot Spitzer was fired?
Oh, sure.
For as governor for going to the New York Madam? Well, some of the board members were patronizing her house of ill repute, and they were told that information was going to be made public if they didn't stop firing Paul Wolfowitz. So they fired Paul Wolfowitz, and anyway, so then I started rattling around the U.S. Congress, and you can see from my website, which is www.kahudes.net, you can see the correspondence there. And I'll just give you one piece of correspondence. That was when I went to Dominique Strauss-Kahn, who was the managing director, and I started asking Dominique Strauss-Kahn to end the corruption. And instead what Dominique did was he sort of hung me out to dry and then ended up appointing his own personal lawyer, who's now the general counsel of the World Bank. So he wasn't really a good guy, although he was trying to do a little more than some of the other managing directors, like Christine Lagarde. But anyway, so when later on, when Dominique Strauss-Kahn started asking about the gold, which the World Bank and the IMF are in charge of, you know what happened to him. And so I knew that Dominique Strauss-Kahn was being set up, and that was not really the way the United States should be acting. And so I started. I went and I talked to the guy who was representing me, Chris Van Hollen, personally, and I said, "You can't be setting up Dominique Strauss-Kahn like this. This is not the way to play ball." Because I had this power transition model that was telling me that the United States had to be an honest broker, or it was going to be chewed up because the rest of the countries weren't going to just accept that. I knew about the existence of these different coalitions. So Chris Van Hollen was totally useless because most of the U.S. Congress, if not all of the U.S. Congress, is just simply there as a useless appendage, soaking up money from the network of global corporate control. They're just bought out. They're bought and paid for. And there was a very interesting study in Princeton where they were trying to see how the votes in Congress went, what was correlated. And it was absolutely not correlated to what people wanted. It was correlated to what the network of global corporate control wanted. So they're just crooks. They're nothing better than crooks, all of them.
Is there a military aspect to the global corporate control's plan to bring America to its knees, as you said?
It's nothing but a military plan, and that's why, knowing this plan, what I did was I went to Japan, which is out of the chain of command, because Japan is relying on the U.S. military for its security. And so I was dealing with a committee, a joint Japan-U.S. committee. And I was talking to them about how the United States was going to be unilaterally surrendered and its currency was going to fail unless Japan would represent its own interests and help the citizens inside the United States get rid of the Federal Reserve. And that's exactly where we are. That's what they're doing. And getting to Japan was not easy, by the way, because I didn't get a direct flight, and I had to transfer in Hawaii. And Hawaii Airlines wasn't going to let me have their boarding card to get on the flight from Hawaii to Japan. They said that since I didn't have a return ticket, the people inside Japan weren't going to let me in, and therefore they couldn't fly me there. And the reason I didn't have a return ticket was because I wasn't sure whether I was going to stay there for 3 months, but if I did, then I was going to stop off in Australia to talk at the Nexus conference, which is the way I came back. Anyway, so finally I told the person inside the boarding lounge, I said, I can't get my computer to buy me a ticket out of Japan. Will you help me? And for some reason, she wasn't able to get me a ticket either. And finally, one of the flight attendants let me get on the plane and board it. But anyway, all kinds of strange things happen. The network of global corporate control, if you look at what goes on in my tweets, or I have a Tuesday program on DCTV, that's a public access TV, and I upload the segments afterwards. I've been on there now for about 4 months. And what happened at our last, we were talking about gold, that was just aired on Tuesday, yesterday. The network of global corporate control started interfering with the live streaming. And then when I put the text of the teleprompter up on my Twitter account this morning, I put it up early, and then I went and took a nap. And when I came back, I found that the network of global corporate control had taken it down and put something else up. So I had to put it back up. I mean, it's really, at this point, enough people know about that network's existence that they just can't get away with it anymore. That's what this power transition model shows. I have a lot of people that are saying, if you don't have, an army backing you, how is it that you think we're going to have a peaceful transition according to the power transition model? And it's very simple, because what you have is you have information. And the information is out there. And one of the things that I got was a very good book that was written by a guy who called himself Robert O'Bannon. I now know what his real name is. But anyway, he wrote a wonderful book. And the book said that this network of global corporate control has to have secrecy in order to continue. And it doesn't have secrecy.
What's the end game for this group?
Well, what they want is totally irrelevant. What they're trying to push us to is another Dark Ages, just like the 400s. They want paper currency to crash. But it's not going to happen, and the likelihood that it doesn't happen is 90 to 95%, and that's because the World Bank and the IMF are sitting on the world's gold. And everybody knows it now because I found out about it 2 years ago, and I've been telling everybody, and the Internet is really quite efficient in spreading that information. And there were a lot of people that thought it wasn't true, that that's not where the gold was. And then, I've been getting a lot of help from the world's lawyers. So one of the things that you can do if you're the lawyer for the Global Debt Facility is you can file liens against people who owe you money. And the people that owe us money, that's the network of global corporate control. So I have filed liens against all 12 Federal Reserve banks. And in the state of Illinois, there's a law that says that the Secretary of State of Illinois can declare one of those financing statements to be invalid. So that's what he did. And I went back to him, I read the statute and said, well, you can't declare the lien of a bank that's regulated to be invalid. And since the World Bank is, I don't know the best way to describe its relationship to the Global Debt Facility, it has to authenticate the signature of the person who's signing for the Global Debt Facility. And because I've been in touch with all of the countries, and when I say I've been in touch with them, it's not just their executive directors, but I've been putting things out to all of the embassies in Washington and the embassies in New York and also the embassies in Tokyo. So whenever I say something and I say that the Board of Governors agrees to it, I copy all the embassies and I say, if any of this is incorrect, let me know. And, I'm pretty careful to just put the things in that that are absolutely necessary. I'm not trying to declare agreements when there aren't any agreements. But I think it's pretty clear now that all of the countries in the world are sick and tired of this network of global corporate control. Why should people want to have their citizens work 4 months out of the year to pay off this network for no reason? Because paper currency is a scam. The way it works is they issue the currency, they print the paper, or they just have the currency come into existence digitally, and they get to keep the difference between what it costs them to print the paper dollars and the face value. So, and then they charge the country's interest on it. So that's just a huge scam. I mean, it's great for the banks, and it's terrible for everybody else. And there were some countries like Canada where they didn't have one of these central banks. And then somebody in 1974 decided that Canada shouldn't get to keep its own value, its own currency. Now, John F. Kennedy tried to take that back. That's why he was assassinated. Ronald Reagan had a really wonderful idea to try to also get rid of this network of global corporate control. That's why Hinckley shot him. But anyway, so I can go on and on about what all of the agreements are that the countries want. But the most important takeaway for people who are listening in is that this network is no longer in charge. So what happened when Illinois invalidated its financing statement was the Fed started moving all of its operations from New York to Chicago. So I copied all of the, first of all, I wrote a letter to the Secretary of State of Illinois, and in that case, I was very, very careful. It wasn't just sending emails to the embassies. I sent letters by priority mail so I could see that they'd been delivered. And I sent them, and I said, this is the draft letter that I'm writing to the Secretary of State of Illinois saying that he has no right to invalidate the lien. And so I sent that letter, and then when the Secretary of State of Illinois invalidated it anyway, I wrote him a little nasty letter saying, well, that may be what you're trying to do, but you're not going to get away with it because nobody agrees with you. Every single country in the world knows full well that those gold reserves belong to them and not to the Fed. So, and that's tweeted. Anybody that wants to can see the correspondence between me and the Secretary of State of Illinois. And then I copied all of the 50 Secretaries of State. So it's pretty clear that this gold is real, and there have been some other silly attempts that the Network of Global Corporate Control made to try to steal the world's gold. And each time, I slapped them down because the gold is in the global debt facility, which is administered by the World Bank and the IMF. Doesn't belong to the Network of Global Corporate Control. All those people is bankrupt. They have absolutely no claim whatsoever on a plug nickel anymore because they're all bankrupt. And everything that you see happening now is happening because we're in transition. And so all of the horrible things that you read in the paper, it's just the Network of Global Corporate Control trying to distract you. You know, when you see a magician and there's all this commotion going on, that's just to take people away from this central story, which is that all of humanity is taking its wealth back from these crooks that have been in place and bamboozling us. You know, like how a salesman will bamboozle you. Well, humanity has been bamboozled by this Network of Global Corporate Control ever since the previous ice age. It goes way back. It doesn't just go back to, the 6,000 years. Every single history book that we have has got to be fundamentally rewritten.
So let's get into the retaliation that's been done against you for being a whistleblower against everything you just described.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people that say it is so incredible, this story is so incredible that it couldn't possibly be true, and that I'm really a secret agent. And all you have to do, actually, is to look through, I have a chronology on my website to see exactly what I've been doing and how I've been growing on the job and learning, because one of the things that I am is I'm feisty, and I was the captain of the NYU fencing team, and so my Hungarian fencing coach drilled into me that when somebody's attacking you, you absolutely cannot panic, you cannot flinch, you cannot, that's what you do when you're learning to fence. When somebody like your Hungarian fencing coach shouts, blood-curdling shouts and charges at you, you clench up. And what they drill into you is that is the time to score. That's the time to just relax and keep your eye on your opponent and parry them, because when somebody's attacking you, they can't defend themselves. That's when they open up. And so that's your chance to score. And so that's what you see through this timeline. You see me scoring against the people that are attacking me. And yeah, I've been attacked and I have been hit and knocked down, and I've learned each time what it was that I should do the next time so that thing doesn't happen to me again. And that's, I've been nearly killed in a synagogue. Some agent who didn't belong to the synagogue got in front of line, and he brought his elbow up real sharp. And if you read about what happens when you're hit with a lot of force under your chin, that's a killing stroke. But I'm 5'9", so he couldn't get his elbow up with enough torque to kill me. He knocked me out. I mean, I didn't fall down, but I staggered out of that place. But that's when I knew I could score. So you should see the email that I wrote to the man who represented Israel on the board of the World Bank. And that's why the embassies closed. There was a time when the embassies closed in Israel. That's when they closed. And I just recently posted that. So there's been a lot of retaliation, but the fact is that I give as good as I get.
So, why don't we imagine a world where the global corporate control doesn't exist anymore at all? How would you rebuild the world economic system from scratch, Karen Hudes?
Okay, let's start out with your hypothesis. We are going to have that group with us, and when I say we, I mean each and every one of us. It's going to take us centuries to recover from where, we didn't just get here by accident, and it's going to take us centuries to rewind. Now, when they wrote the Articles of Agreement for the World Bank, they knew that it was going to be our job to distribute the gold. And so I tried to think of a way that we could do that without building up something in the center that was going to perpetuate the network, that was going to make it very easy for them to stay in control. That's how I came up with this idea of currencies. And you'll know that most of the currencies are local currencies. They're issued in the local areas. So your business people are going to decide on the local currency, and it's going to be valid wherever the businesses decide it's going to be. They're going to, it's going to be for the cities or the villages. It's going to be totally decentralized up to the local jurisdictions. There aren't going to be any more legal tender laws. But then this gold that belongs to humanity is going to be put into the currency. That's going to make the currency honest. It's going to mean that the bankers don't have any leverage over anybody anymore. But there are a lot of slick operators, smooth operators, and they're not going to make it easy for us to clean things up. It's not going to happen in one fell swoop, and there isn't going to be anybody in control. The rules at the World Bank are that you cannot intervene in the local areas. You can't intervene in the local politics. So one of the things I'm going to be talking about on my next program is how in the United States are we going to get ourselves out of the state capture. And it's going to happen in each and every local area and at the county level. And the counties are not all clean either. So everybody is going to have to figure out who's got their hand in the till and make it more difficult for them. And this isn't going to be easy because the accounting profession has been accounting for the network of global corporate control. They've been total crooks. And the legal profession has also made it possible. They've been totally complicit. They've been, I don't think there's going to be a legal profession anymore. We're going to have to learn how to administer justice ourselves in some way. I can't imagine how we're going to be going forward. But we do have to do it in a very smooth way because as an economist, I know that you don't want to have massive unemployment. You don't want to go and fire all the crooks because then what happens is you've got a multiplier effect. So we've got to have a smooth transition, and it's got to be done gradually. But it's not going to be done by the World Bank. It's going to be done in the individual countries by the citizens. And because they've been dominated by this network, and because all of their media has been telling everybody lies, and we didn't even begin to talk about some of this terrible technology that the military has that can hack into people's moods and thought processes, because people have they're like radio transmitters. That's how they think. It sounds improbable, but that's the way it is. And the military have learned how to use something called extremely low frequencies to hack into people's thought processes. That's why so many of us are really not responding to the news the way the news really is. And I was looking at some of your political cartoons, and you have one about the sheep just jumping off the cliff, and there's one sheep that's not jumping off the cliff. There are people who are resistant to that technology. I'm one of them. In my family, half of us are resistant, and half of us are just sort of bamboozled by, the soothing radio waves that are being broadcast to us.
So, Karen, you have the floor. What project are you working on what message would you like to get out to our listeners? Say what you want. You have the floor. Go.
Okay. What I want is I want people not to panic. I want people to, some of you may be hearing this for the first time, and some of you may be absolutely thinking I'm off the wall for saying all of this stuff. So what you have to do is you have to get yourself into a study group of people that you really know and like, because you should be working together with that group as we go forward. The chances that we are in a global currency reset are 90 to 95%. I'm very confident in this power transition model. I've seen it working beautifully. And so that's where we are. I can't say exactly how long it's going to take until we're all in this transition, but I do know that that's where we're headed. I can't say how smooth the transition is going to be because, as I said, this network, although enough of us understand exactly who they are and what they're trying to make this transition happen, there are enough of us that are bamboozled that they can manipulate. And so you're going to be seeing the I guess the best way to describe it is the process of the people who understand what's going on, the savvy ones, trying to educate the ones that are still bamboozled. Either you have to see it on a mainstream media broadcast to think it's really happened, although the mainstream media is totally owned by this network of global corporate control. So as you can see, it's going to be a process of educating people. And the best way for that to happen is it's certainly not going to be rolled out in a glossy manual. I've had people criticizing me, saying that, well, I should have a better way of broadcasting what's going on. But I'm just right in the center, in the very epicenter of this, and I'm doing the best I can using social media and getting a fair amount of help. But I also have to be a little bit cautious. I can't let somebody come in and take over what it is I'm doing, because I'm the one who's representing this. It's the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF, and it's also the Coalition for the Rule of Law. Now, if I let somebody come in and take over that, you better believe that's probably somebody who's working and on the payroll for the network of global corporate control. So I just have to take it slow and not delegate very much, which it turns out it's been a pretty good way of going forward. I just recently had a little fight on my Twitter because there was a woman who came to me and said that she didn't have anywhere to live because her boyfriend threw her out because she believed what I was saying, and he thought she was nuts. So, I felt really badly for her, but I also was cautious. And so I said, well, I'm sorry, I'll see if I can find some support for you. And I checked with some people that had been supporting me, and they said, well, tell her to go to a church. They'll help her. Anyway, so this person, her name is Christine Chadwick, then tried to take over what it was I was tweeting. I said, no, Christine, I'm not delegating that to you. She did that a couple of times. I found out that that's somebody working with Gordon Duff. And Gordon Duff is the editor of Veterans Today. That is a group of shills. That group is trying to protect Martin Dempsey. It's trying to protect the crooks in the military that are trying to surrender us unilaterally. Anyway, so after a while, I said to Christina, look, you're misleading people. You're telling people that I'm letting you speak for me, and I'm definitely not. Now just go away and don't bother me anymore. If I hear from you, and if I hear from people that you're trying to speak for me, I'm going to tell everybody about you. So just recently, one of the people that I'm working with quite closely sent me the email that she had sent her, Christine. So that's when I just outed her. I said, Christine, I warned you. I said, don't mess with me or I will publicly expose just who you are and what you're doing. So this morning on my Twitter account, I saw that somebody else was trying to defend Christine. I said, okay, you're out of here too. You're blocked. I don't need you. I don't want you. So that's how I work. And it's, I can't do it any other way. I can't roll it out more fast than I can do it myself, and that people who hear the message and look into all the documents, because everything I say is documented meticulously. And it's not because I do such good work. It's because there are people who understand that this is all a cooperative effort, and they're helping. So that's how this works. And it's all word of mouth, pretty much. But since I've been doing it for a fair amount of time, there's a fair amount of interest, because enough people have seen, yeah, it is the real deal. Yeah, there is this humongous trust. And it's not just gold. It's also the world's artworks. And just recently, there's a group that just started publishing for Russia called Sputnik News, and they started mentioning that there was a gold train, a Nazi gold train that they found, and also there was this priceless room just covered with amber that was found. Now, that belongs to the Global Debt Facility. So I wrote a letter to Poland's embassy, and I also copied Switzerland, because remember I told you some of the countries are grouped together in what they call constituencies. Well, Switzerland's executive director represents Poland. So I wrote to Poland's embassy as well, and I said, those artworks belong to all of us. They're part of the world's patrimony. They're owned by the Global Debt Facility. And I've got to get back inside the World Bank, and you have to help me get back inside the World Bank so that I and we can represent all of the people whose wealth this really is. So that's where things are now. There are enough people that understand that this is really the case, that this network of global corporate control, it's just like the Wizard of Oz. It's a wizard with a projection screen trying to scare us. And the only real power is our power, and when we realize what the real story is. And some of us do understand it, and it's our job to keep the other people from panicking. Because, and I hope we can start working on this transition into real gold currency. And everybody, if you're also trying to figure out what's a takeaway from this radio show, in your local communities, organize the people so that you have local currency. There are a lot of places in the United States that do this. Nothing's preventing you from doing it, and you absolutely will have a vibrant, full economy in your region when you do that. And we need this in addition to the national currencies. So, this is a joint project. I mean, when you were saying what is it that I have in mind, what I have in mind is, as a cheerleader, to get everybody cracking on our joint project.
Well, Karen, thank you very much for coming on the show today. You are a wealth of information. You you are a extremely engaging guest. You bring great information. I'd love to have you back on the show again in the future. We are about to go to break and bring back Wayne Madsen for our weekly segment, The Week with Wayne. But Karen, if you could hold while we go to break, I'd like to have a word with you, if you could.
Sure, and thanks for having me on, Jake. I appreciate it.
All right, we're going to go to break here. We're going to come back with Wayne Madsen. Stay tuned, please.